Praise God. I love worshiping. I hope all of you do too. And the reason I had a couple other people come up and worship is because certain songs and the way that they sing it, they bless me, they bless them, and I hope that when they get it, then they'll turn around and they'll just throw it at you and they'll bless you. A lot of people have a hard time with God. They have a hard time with creation. They have a hard time with the Trinity. They have a hard time with the rapture. They have a hard time with prophecy in the future. It's okay to have a hard time. It's okay to be honest and say, I'm having a hard time. But even more so, it's okay to say, but I'm going to find out. Because it's right here. Amen? It truly is. So, all this week we're going to have Russ Miller. He's going to be here the whole time. So every single night he's going to be showing up here. We want you to show up here. We're going to be having a different thing every night. We want you to be able to have an education. So because the school system lies to you. Did you know that? The government lies to you. Did you know that? Is there anybody that thinks the government may not lie to you? How many know the IRS really loves you? There you go. Okay? And so it's every now and then it's nice to know the truth. But I'm going to tell you this right now. No matter what you hear, you always have to remember this one thing. There's only one truth. There's only one. He has a name. And his name is Jesus. And you can't divide this from him because they go together. It's a package deal. So if you want to know the truth, this is it. Amen? You could live by it, stand on it. The Word of God is used for 4 primary, main, important things. Okay? And the way that you always know that it's valid is you could always find it's historical, practical, prophetical, and literal. That's how we study it. We study the history of it, the practicality of it. If you just know the history of it, you will know so much. If you just apply it to your life, you're going to be one of the most decent, moral human beings in the world. And also you can use it for prophecy, for whatever is going to happen in the future, because everything in the past that was prophesied about Jesus happened. Everything Jesus prophesied about the end will happen. It's already been done once. It's going to be done again. Okay? And the last thing is literal. And Brother Russ and I were talking about that today. And so tonight he's going to talk to you about a lot of the literal that most people just don't want to talk about. The colleges don't want to talk about, because if the truth comes out, then you're going to have to repent. Because it meant that sin did come by man, and that you have sin, and you've got to admit your sin, and you need a redeemer, and it puts Jesus back on the stage again. How many want Jesus back on the stage again? Praise the Lord. Brother Russ, we love you. Come on up, my friend. You got everything worked out with the media back there? We're going to find out. Okay? Brother Russ, give him a great big hand, you guys. Is there any announcements we're missing? I want to make sure I'm not missing any announcements that Johnny would have given or something. We all good? Okay. MRT. MRT is still here. You're going to come instead of MRT. You will be coming here, but you have to show up. You still have to show up. So just because you're not having MRT doesn't mean that you don't show up to this. Because otherwise, if you miss this, you missed MRT. Which means, okay, everybody got it? All right, Brother Russ.
Thank you, sir. Okay, wow, thank you. Thank you. How you doing tonight? Awesome. Well, hey, again, my name is Russ Miller, and we're going to go ahead and start. My wife, Joanne, and I have a ministry we feel God gave us to steward that we call Creation, Evolution, and Science Ministries. You might have guessed that. And we came up with that name because sometimes we talk about creation in biblical accounts. Other times, like primarily tonight, we'll talk about evolution and secular accounts. But we always try to tie these two beliefs about our origins into the evidence. And we'll talk about the reasons for that here in a few moments. But let's go ahead and get right into it. The Bible tells us that people professing to be wise will become fools. Now, this doesn't mean a person is stupid. It means they've been fooled. We can all be fooled. And they're going to change the glory of the uncorruptible God, which I think today is His creation, into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. You know, I think they're going to change creation into the fairy tale of Darwinian evolution. See, these verses are talking about idolatry. And the highest form of idolatry is to think you're the most evolved, you're your own God. We call that humanism today. The humanists, secularists, they own the system and they force their belief on everyone going through our public schools and universities. We're in a war of worldviews, the secular view versus the biblical view. Satan is the god of this world. He's the prince of the air. His side owns the system. They teach their beliefs, as I think we should probably expect. One of Satan's top lies is to get people to think that evolution and science are the same thing. If you go on a college campus and you show some of the frauds of Darwinism, students are going to go, "Why are you attacking science?" Well, I'm not attacking science. I might attack Darwinism, but I don't attack science. But they think science and Darwinian evolution are the same thing. They're not. Here's an email that kind of explains that. You make Christians look stupid when you attack science. Face it, evolution is a proven fact. Do you see how they've mixed the two up? As if science and evolution are both the same word? They're not. Science is science. Evolution's evolution, and we'll talk about some of the different types of evolution tonight as well. But real science, which is a believer's best friend, is knowledge derived from the study and testing of existing evidence. Something must be testable, studyable, repeatable, and even refutable, possible to refute for it to be truly science. Both evolution and creation are beliefs on how we came about. Neither is science, but they make predictions that real science should support. Most people today don't know it because this has been taken over by secularists, but over 80% of the branches of modern science were started by Christians to study God's creation. There wouldn't even be science if it weren't for Christianity. You can't set out to study random chance. Christians thought, well, we have an intelligent creator. He probably put some rules in place to govern the creation. And if we study the creation, they call it nature today. If we study the creation, we could discover things and apply those principles to our lives and improve things. That's led to many of the great improvements, from laptops to penicillin to space shuttles to airplanes. And that's because of real science, a believer's best friend. You know, the Bible is the only book in the history of the world that lives on its ability to correctly predict the future. Hundreds and hundreds of prophecies have been made that have already come true. Every religious text makes prophecies, and in some, 1 out of 6 or 8 might come true. The Bible is hundreds for hundreds. The mathematical odds of 20 in a row coming through are in the trillions to 1. The Bible is hundreds for hundreds. Here's one in the Old Testament given to the ancient Israelites saying that people would turn their back on God, saying to a stone, "Thou hast brought me forth." Well, come on now. Now, we're too smart for that today, right? I mean, we would never let anyone tell us we came from a stone, right? Right? Let's go to the modern textbook and see what kids are taught. Kids, Earth is thought, believed, to have formed 4.5 billion years ago, and it started out as a big ball of hot rock. And then oceans formed as it rained on the stone, the rock, for millions of years, and poof, here we are today. They are indeed teaching we were brought forth from a stone. Now, the Bible tells us, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit after the rudiments of the world and not after Christ. Beware of man's ever-changing philosophies. And there are really only two viable philosophies out there on our origins. Either the world evolved on its own, like secularists believe, or God created the world just like he says he did. Now, I live near Sedona, Arizona, and in Sedona they have that group that says, well, maybe we're not here at all. Maybe we just think we're here. You guys ever run into those guys? I do all the time. I don't pay a lot of attention to them. We really are here. And the Bible tells us to prove all things and hold fast that which is good. So, hey, let's do just that. Let's look at the top 10 lies of Darwinian evolution taken right out of public school and college textbooks. We're going to talk about life coming from non-life, the supposed simple cell, neo-Darwinism, micro and macro evolution. This really upsets Darwinists when you define the difference. I'll show you when we get there. Homology, the study of similarities, resistance, recapitulation, the fossil record, Tiktaalik, and hominids. You're going, what in the world is all that? We'll go through it here in just the next couple of minutes. Darwinian lie number one is the belief that life came from non-life. Now, to be fair to the Darwinian position, Darwin's book, which was The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So let's just take the first half, which is all they promote today anyways. The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Now, to be fair to the Darwinian position, even though they're completely unfair to our side, they will deny vehemently that Darwinism has anything to do with the start of life. So they will now say the origin of the species had nothing to do with the origin of the species. But first of all, Darwin, he postulated that maybe life started in a little warm pond. And then it became maybe a lightning strike started life, because we see lightning strikes start life all the time, right? And this requires what was called spontaneous generation. Somewhere, because remember, they're saying there was a big ball of rock that formed after the Big Bang. I think we're on our fourth Big Bang now. They've all been pretty well debunked. So they're saying then nothing, big rock formed, it rained on the rock for millions of years, and poof, somehow life started. Well, that would require what's called spontaneous generation, where somewhere non-life, poof, came to life. Well, science has pretty much debunked that for years, so they've switched over to what they call a biogenesis, which is basically spontaneous generation just stretched out over time. But they still needed that magic moment where, poof, life came from non-life. So they try to say Darwinism has nothing to do with the start of life, because they can't get it started from non-living matter. In fact, the law of biogenesis holds that life only comes from life. You can't get a wet, sterile rock to produce life. They cannot get life started. This is one of the many major hurdles for Darwinian evolutionism. So they're going to try to get kids to think, well, maybe scientists in labs have been able to produce life from non-life. If you look at their experiments closely, you will see they've never come anywhere near creating life in a lab, even with human intelligence and computers and more thrown in, building on years and years of millions of other scientists' experiments. Now, they have been able to create some non-living matter that is found in living matter, and they've tried to sell people on they've created life in the lab, but they've never come close. It'd be like us creating calcium. Since calcium is found in humans, announcing to the world, we've created a human being. No, they've come nowhere near creating life in a lab. The law of biogenesis has never been known to have been overcome. So think about it logically. Millions of the brightest scientific minds, with billions of dollars in prize money waiting for them, building on years and years of millions of other researchers' findings, with computers, lab equipment, etc. thrown in, cannot make non-living matter produce life even in a laboratory. Yet our kids are taught that rocks and seawater did it on their own. Oh, but not today, when you can test, study, and observe it and show it happening. No, long ago and far away. That is not science, that's anti-science. In fact, at Northern Arizona University, I spoke there several times. It had such an impact. One biology teacher quit her job, became a Christian, and now teaches science in a Christian school. It had such an impact, they started an accredited course attacking me in biblical creation. They ran for at least 4 years. They might still run it, I don't know. I don't pay much attention to them. But they used the book in the class written by the president of the National Center of Science Education, which is really just a Darwinian propaganda machine. She's one of the world's most outspoken known atheists. So that's her bias. Everyone has a bias. That's hers. And so I said, hey, let's go to the book used in the college course attacking creation and to see how the president of the National Center of Science Education explains how life started from non-life. And on page 26, I found the origin of life was a continuum of events with a lot of iffy stuff in the middle. Google it, page 26, so you'll know I'm not making this up. They've got the iffy stuff. That's their modern explanation. This former Harvard professor and Nobel Prize winner stated, modern biologists, having reviewed the downfall of spontaneous generation, life starting from non-life, yet unwilling to accept creation, are left with nothing. They've got nothing. Well, they do have the iffy stuff. And unfortunately, they own the system. Darwinian lie number 2. Okay, life didn't start out as anything complex. It was just a simple cell. Have you ever heard of the simple cell? Started out as just a simple cell? Well, this book, trying to get around the law of biogenesis, this book tells kids, all the many forms of life on Earth today are descended, stated as a scientific fact, are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. How in the world is a kid supposed to argue with that? Why would they? They've just been told it's a scientific fact, right? Well, I guess a fair question would be, since real science is knowledge derived from the study of the evidence, what evidence do they have of this? Well, it says right here, no traces of those events remain. There is not a shred of evidence. From the Big Bang, any one of the 4 Big Bang theories we're on to now, to this big rock, to the rain on the rock, to the poof moment where life became on its own, to the many forms that have descended from this common ancestor, there is not a shred of evidence. 0. Now, if they started this out with once upon a time and put it in a kid's book, I wouldn't be here tonight. But they're teaching it in school as if it were a scientific fact, and misleading not millions, billions of people around the globe. But real science is knowledge derived from the study and testing of evidence. For instance, if the cell is so simple, let's just take just a brief look at a bacteria cell. They're run by tiny molecular motors called bacterial flagellum. Real science, a believer's best friend, have discovered these tiny molecular motors that allow the cell to swim around and perform its various functions. It can even change gears depending on how much weight it's towing or pushing. Well, it's made up of 40 very complex specific proteins that must be there in the exact order to form the flagellum at the exact moment for life to start, or life couldn't start on its own. As real science gets into the cell, nothing simple about a cell, it requires other molecular motors that almost must be there and whole at the very moment to put the flagellum together so life could start. There is no way life is just going to poof come about from a wet, sterile rock. The law of biogenesis never has and never will be overcome. And design of this magnitude demands there be a designer behind it. As we get into the RNA DNA system, again, the whole debate between creation and evolution should have come to a screeching halt, but it's a battle of religious beliefs, worldviews. It's not a battle of science. Genetic information is so complex, we now know that genetic information can be read forwards and backwards, and they're starting to think diagonally. The best human technology in the world only reads in one direction. Genetic information is beyond human comprehension. It's so complex. We probably only understand a small percentage of it right now. One mathematician, molecular biologist, calculated the odds of one DNA chromosome forming on its own in nature to being 1 in 10 to the 100 billionth power. What kind of a number is that? Well, 1 in 10 to 80 is generally accepted as absolute zero. People argue about that. But you guys have a state lottery here? They have a state lottery in Arizona. Your odds of winning the state lottery in Arizona, and I'm not suggesting that you play it, but if you did, your odds of winning the state lottery in Arizona every weekend, 52 weekends in a row for 27,000 years in a row is mathematically better than one DNA chromosome forming on its own in a natural setting. In other words, it's not going to happen. And you're made up of an estimated 75 trillion cells. You know, we like to throw around big numbers today. We might somewhat understand a million. We really don't get a grasp on a billion. And we certainly don't understand a trillion. So I'm going to use seconds just to give you a feel for time. 60 seconds in a minute. We're going to use seconds. 1 million seconds ago was about a week ago last Friday. That's 1 million seconds. What's the difference between 1 million and 1 billion seconds? Well, 1 billion seconds was back in 1988. That's the difference between 1 million and 1 billion. Well, what's the difference between 1 billion and 1 trillion? Well, 1 trillion seconds ago would have been over 32,000 years of time. Wow. And we're how many trillions in debt now? Oh, wait a minute, that's a whole different thing. Forget that. Anyways, we won't go there right now. But we're made up of an estimated 75 trillion cells. A single cell's DNA contains about 3.6 billion base pairs of genetic information. 3.6 billion times 75 trillion cells for one person. Wow, talk about complexity. You really think that evolved on its own from a wet rock? Mind-boggling. We like to shrink things down, and we're pretty proud of ourselves so we can make a camera the size of an eraser. Think about this. God designed genetic information so compactly and so complex that the genetic information to form all 7 billion people on Earth could fit into a container the size of an aspirin. Talk about complexity, right? Mind-boggling proof. See, when we stand before our Creator, we will stand with no excuse whatsoever. Darwinian lie number 3 is called neo-Darwinism. This is what's actually taught in schools, has been for a long time. See, Darwinism on its own, it had no way for nature to add the new and beneficial genetic information required to power Darwinian macro change. So neo-Darwinism was invented, and this states that, think about this, mutations create new and beneficial genetic information. That's where the information comes from mutations. Any dads or granddads out there, when you were waiting in the delivery room, were you praying your child or grandchild would have mutations? No, of course not. Mutations are usually, at best, they have no impact, but they're often detrimental and even fatal. But this is neo-Darwinism. That's what's taught today. Mutations are the hero combined with the magic ingredient millions of years of time, which we'll take apart tomorrow night. They have a lot of different types of mutations. Mutations are a scientific fact. There's copying errors, duplication mutations, point mutations, Hox gene mutations, a lot of different types. Frameshift mutations are one of their favorite ones to use to support neo-Darwinism. So let's just use it as our example. Frameshift mutations can be deletions, insertions, or inversions. I'm going to use just these simple sentences to show you the result of a frameshift mutation. The sentence reads, "The day was hot, the hot day had one sun, the sun was hot, the one day." Now, if we had a frame shift, let's say the first letter, the T of the, were deleted. And the information would shift to the left, and instead of having that useful information, you'd shift everything to the left and it would look like this. Now, technically, if you want to lose a debate with a Darwinist, say they have no way to add new information to a gene pool, you lose the debate. There's 17 new letters right there, right? Now, it's a loss of all the useful information. It's loss of all the functional information. So if you say they have no way to add new and beneficial genetic information, you win the debate. Do you see the difference? But to say that this is, and even to indicate to students that this is what powers Darwinian change is, I guess I would have to call it dishonesty and fraud at the very best. Mutations result in the sorting or the loss of genetic information, and it's a principle called gene depletion as gene pools get weaker and weaker, not better and better as Darwinism requires. Darwinian lie number 4 is micro is macro. If you ask me, hey Russ, do you believe in evolution? I'd say absolutely. Microevolution. But Darwinism is macroevolution. You want to get a biology professor mad, start trying to nail him down to define the word evolution. They hate to do so because if they define them, everyone would see there's never been any examples of Darwinian macroevolution. Do any of you guys have pet dogs? You know, let's use dogs. It's a good example. You can go down to the pound and get a pair of dogs. Mutts work the best. They have the widest gene pool. Get a male and a female, start breeding them together. And then take puppies with traits you like and breed those puppies together. Now, if you did this for 100 years, you might come up with all 350 types of dogs that we have on Earth today. But they'd still be dogs. Canines will produce canines. Dogs are going to produce dogs. That would just be micro changes. Changes within that kind are just micro changes caused through mutations or adaptations, but they're caused by the sorting or the loss of the starting genetic information inherited from the parents. So the gene pools get weaker and weaker and weaker. That's what breeders use. Breeders use gene depletion every day. You don't breed in new information, you breed out through gene depletion what you don't want until you get a purebred that has the most restricted gene pool of all. You breed 2 purebred yellow labs together, guess what your puppies are going to be? Yellow labs. You breed 2 mutts together, guess what your puppies are going to be? You don't have any idea till you see them, right? Microevolution is your changes. It's best to get the word evolution out of there since Darwinists like to confuse people with it. Micro is just simply micro adaptations, micro transitions. It's simply kinds bringing forth after their kind. Every single scientific experiment ever conducted on this issue shows the only thing that is found are micro changes within the same kind, scientifically the same family. Why is it vital for Christians, especially students, to understand that kinds only bring forth after their kind scientifically? Well, because 10 times in the book of Genesis, we were told that plants or animals will bring forth after their kind. I think I skipped the slide there. There we go. 10 times in Genesis, we're told plants or animals will bring forth after their kind. And today, after millions of scientific experiments, the only thing that's ever been observed is that kinds only bring forth after their kind, just like the Bible said. Did I ever mention that real science is a believer's best friend? But see, what Darwinists do is they'll show micro changes and they'll get kids to think that's macro change, fooling kids into thinking Darwinism's true when it's the biggest fairy tale in the history of the world. Microadaptations are also caused by the result of the sorting of the loss of the starting genetic information as gene pools get weaker and weaker, gene depletion. So students are given lots of examples of biblically correct micro change, but then they switch the discussion to Darwinian macro, and kids think they've been shown the Bible's not true. Total and complete dishonesty and fraud. Darwin never saw an example of Darwinian evolution, so I'm having a little trouble with this. I push it once, it's going 2 or 3 times, so I'm just trying to hang in there. But all he saw were finches producing finches. Is that Darwinian macro change, or is that just a micro change? Darwinism observed biblically correct micro change, finches bringing forth finches. We didn't know anything about genetics back then, so that's somewhat forgivable, but these are just caused by the sorting or the loss of the starting information. So this is how I show people how to scientifically destroy Darwinism in 4 seconds flat. Start your watch. Gene depletion plus natural selection makes Darwinism a scientific impossibility. Stop your watch. That's the reason they have no evidence to support it. It never happened. Anybody be thinking about, wait, Russ, I've been shown lots of evidence. Let's get into some of the evidence, okay? What about lie number 5A? From the study of similarities, which is called homology, let's look at similar biochemistry. Have you ever heard you're 98% the same in your biochemistry as a chimpanzee? Anyone ever hear that one? They throw that out all the time, don't they? Now, real science, a believer's best friend, I've seen published reports in Nature magazine having a 30% difference between chimp and human chromosomes. So why do they still teach a 2% difference? In fact, if they're going to teach similarities in biochemistry, prove our evolutionary past, they should teach kids we evolved from worms, which are 75% the same as that from a human. Or a banana that's 50% the same in its biochemistry as a human being. Anyone here evolved from a banana? Just one? Well, that's not bad. Last time I was in a college, 500 students raised their hand, and they were serious because they've been taught we evolved from a common ancestor, which would mean you're related to bananas. I got home that night, I checked my family tree. There wasn't a banana in the whole bunch. Oh, didn't find that very appealing, eh? Okay, lie number 6. Is that antibiotic or poison resistance is proof of Darwinian macro change. Actually, this has nothing whatsoever to do with the addition of new kinds with new and beneficial genetic information. Let's say I had 1,000 cockroaches right here on the floor. And it was running right toward all these ladies in the front row. 1,000 cockroaches. But I sprayed poison on them and killed 998. But 2 survived. And you guys didn't stomp on them either. Did those 2 instantaneously evolve an immune system? No, of course not. They already had the gene that allowed them to survive that particular poison. The others didn't have it and were killed or died off. Now, when those 2 have offspring, the offspring inherit that gene, they're immune to the poison. They evolved nothing. The information was already there. So let me ask you a question. Why do Darwinists use this as one of their biggest proofs of Darwinian evolution when it has nothing to do with Darwinian evolution? Why don't they just get rid of the frauds and fill the textbooks with the real information supporting Darwinian change? Have I mentioned they don't have any? Did I mention gene depletion plus natural selection makes Darwinism a scientific impossibility? Yeah. Okay, lie number 7. From embryology, the study of fetuses. Kids, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Well, how's a kid supposed to argue with that, right? What this basically means is you go through your evolutionary stages while you're still in your mother's womb. Now, these drawings from left to right across the top were developed back in 1869. 10 years after Darwin's book came out, Ernst Haeckel had the same problem Darwinists had today. He couldn't find any evidence it ever happened. So he did what Darwinists have become famous for. He made up some proof. And he took a human in the embryonic stage and made copies of the human and labeled them fish, salamander, turtle, chicken, etc., and came up with the theory of recapitulation, the biogenetic law, they called it. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. And as you see, the photos right below don't look like his drawings. It was proven in the 1870s that these were fakes. Proven fraud in the 1870s, still taught in colleges today. Yeah, this is a college textbook right here. It says, kids, whether they develop into fish, amphibians, or humans, all vertebrate embryos start out very similar with gill slits and a long tail. You used to have gill slits and a long tail? Really? I wonder why they don't just show pictures. Nice drawings, though. There's an old saying that goes like this. Darwinists are experts at drawing things that never existed to support their theory that never took place. Yeah, you take away their crayons, they're left with nothing. So, And they use Ernst Haeckel's original fraudulent drawings as their proof. Can you believe that? Then it goes on, after telling kids that they used to have gill slits and a long tail, and it says, why would humans have embryos with gill slits and a long tail unless their ancestors had these? And kids by the millions accept, wow, we must evolve from lower life forms. My friends, you never had gills or gill slits where the gills used to go. Those are folds in the skin that later develop into organs in the throat and neck area. You never had a tail. The spine is, our backbone is one of the first things to develop. We call the end of the spine the tailbone. It wasn't because you ever had a tail there. Total and complete fraud, mind-boggling dishonesty. Lie number 8, that the fossil record supports evolution. The fossil record is a complete embarrassment to Darwinian evolutionism. Here's an evolutionary tree of life from one of the textbooks, and now at the base of it they typed in the word invertebrate ancestor. Why didn't they show what it was? Well, they wouldn't have any idea what it was. And then they took a nice box of crayons and drew nice colorful lines from the word invertebrate ancestor to everything on Earth, saying this proves evolution. Do you see any actual evidence there? There is absolutely nothing there but their fictitious drawing, right? Mind-boggling. For any one of those lines to be true, they'd have to be made up literally of millions of fossil evidence as one kind slowly developed into the other through the massive input of new and beneficial genetic information, which real science knows of no way for nature to add in any appreciable amounts. So this is another nice drawing, by the way. But they say, well, the lobe-finned fish, he couldn't swim, so he walked around on the bottom of the ocean on his lobe fins. And I guess he got bored with that, so he crawled out on land and became an amphibian. Now they teach the lobefin where they were teaching lobefin went extinct 325 million years ago. They crawled out on land, became an amphibian, but the amphibian has feet, shoulders, claws, elbows, a different neck system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, and the central nervous system for all these changes, and real science knows of no way for nature to add that kind of change. But the lobe-finned fish, he's been found alive today, not extinct 325 million years. And he's a very good swimmer. He doesn't crawl around on the bottom of the ocean floor. Oh, and even more telling is the fossilized version up in the upper right-hand corner, which we're told is 325 million years old. He looks exactly like the living lobe-finned fish. I thought things evolved over millions of years of time. Now, they're millions of years based on the fossil record and the straddle layers. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. But there's no change. There's no evolution found in the fossil record. What's that? Why would some and not others? Exactly. So, follow me on this. Stick with me on these couple, because these are all related. Appropriately, on April Fool's Day of 2006, one of the two messiahs for modern Darwinism was announced to the world. Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik, it says, this is from the New York Times. Think about what this says. It's still a fish exhibiting changes that anticipate the beginnings of wrists, elbows, and shoulders. Let me reread that. It's a fish, okay, exhibiting changes that don't have the beginnings, that anticipate how do you anticipate random chance mutations that are going to turn this nubby little bone into elbows, wrists, shoulders, the central nervous system, the muscular system, etc.? Stay with me on this. The deceit here is mind-boggling. Tiktaalik, their new messiah, and the fossilized lobe-finned fish that they said was extinct 325 million years have the same little nubby bone in their side. And the lobe-finned fish, the living lobe-finned fish, has the same nubby bone. It didn't change one iota through the fossil record for their supposed 300 million years. So why would they find Tiktaalik with almost the identical nubby bone in its side and tell everyone it evolved into wrists, shoulders, and elbows? Do you see the dishonesty there? Absolutely mind-boggling. Stay with me on this. It gets worse. There are other living fish today, many catfish, that also have those nubby bones with no evolutionary change, and yet Tiktaalik is now one of the two messiahs of Darwinian evolutionism. they had to come up with a couple of theories to explain why they had no evidence. So if a kid, first they came up with the hope of a monster theory. Back Richard Goldschmidt in about 1930 said, well, there's no evidence for Darwinism in the fossil record. There's what kind of evidence? No evidence. Because maybe evolution just happened overnight. Maybe, reptiles laid eggs and birds popped out. Well, everyone was laughing at the hopeful monster theory. So 50 years later, in 1980, Niles Eldredge and Stephen Gould, world famous promoters of Darwinism, changed it slightly but gave it a better name called punctuated equilibrium. If a kid asks a professor, why is there no evidence in the fossil record? He'll say, don't you know anything? Punctuated equilibrium. What that means is evolution didn't just happen over a long period of time. There was a spurt of evolution and then a long period, what they call stases, with no change, and a spurt of evolution and a long period with no change. And because of that, no evidence was captured in the fossil record. They've got a theory to explain why they've got what? No evidence. They've got no evidence. I thought science was knowledge derived from the study of the evidence. Darwinism is not science. It has undermined science by forcing people to fit all their findings. All scientific findings have to fit this fairy tale today. In fact, for the last 75 years, they've been teaching that 90% of the human DNA genome is junk DNA left over from our evolutionary past. In the last 5 years, they've discovered that junk DNA is probably the key to the entire RNA DNA system. And they've been teaching it was junk and not looking into it for the past 70 years plus. Mind-boggling, undermining real science. We're going to go back to homology here, the study of similarities. We talked about similar biochemistry. Let's look at similar bone structure. This college textbook shows nice drawings, right? Really good drawings. And they show a human with 2 bones in the forelimb and a lizard with 2 bones in the forelimb and a cat's leg and a dog leg, etc. 2 bones in the forelimb. And they say they have similar bone structure because they've come from the common ancestor. Interesting. And what would be the common ancestor that this college teaches kids they evolved from? The lobe-fin fish. Can you believe it? They find the fossilized version and the living version with no change whatsoever. And this college textbook is teaching biology and biochemistry students that they've all evolved from the lobe-fin fish. Absolutely mind-boggling dishonesty at a scale that's almost impossible to even comprehend. You know, similar bone structure and similar biochemistry is better proof you have the same designer. Now, kids, anyone especially still in school, any argument of similarities proving evolution is actually better proof of a similar designer. Keep that in mind. I drive a Ford pickup truck. My next door neighbor, he has a Ford van. Their dashboards are identical. It's not because they evolved from a moped. It's because they had the same designer, right? Absolutely. Lie number 9, birds are simply a twig on the dinosaur's tree of life. Have you heard that now? This is now one of their big things, that dinosaurs evolved into birds. Well, they start out saying, take feathers. Compsognathus evolved the first short hair-like feathers. So Compsognathus was about the size of a chicken, and they said it was the missing link between the dinosaurs and the birds. A year and a half ago, a well-preserved Compsognathus fossil was found. It had 100% reptile scales, 0 feathers whatsoever. All their claimed feathered dinosaurs actually had hair, not feathers, or they had a couple of extinct birds. Think of the emu, and claiming it was a missing link. They claimed Archaeopteryx was the intermediate between reptiles and bird. It was found 2 years after Darwin's book came out. And they said, well, it was the size of a pigeon and had claws on its wing, proving it's a reptile becoming a bird. Well, the hoatzin in South America today has claws on its wings, and it's about the size of a pigeon. No one's claiming it's a missing link of any sort. You know why? because you could test, study, and observe it and find out it's just a bird. That's why. Also, 30 years ago, they found modern birds in the straddle layer below dinosaurs. Well, remember, they say the strata formed slowly over millions of years, and in the secular time frame, that would put birds there before the dinosaurs. And also, reptile DNA, it doesn't have the genetic information to form feathers, which are very complex structures. In real science, a believer's best friend knows of no way for nature to add that kind of genetic information. Reptiles do not have the genetic information to change an ectotherm, like a reptile that's heated externally, into an internally heated endotherm, like a bird. The reptile lung is like our lung. It has one opening. It breathes in, it breathes out the same opening. Avian lungs have two openings. Air comes in one and out the other, so they have massive airflow to power flight. There's no way that lung could have changed without killing off whatever the victim of the mutation would have been. Dozens of non-fossilized dinosaur bones have been found in the last 20 years that still have red blood cells, amino acids, soft, flexible dinosaur tissues, all those layers laid down by water. We'll talk about this tomorrow night. We're laid down by water. Not slowly over never seen millions of years of time. And lie number 10, the hominids. Here's a textbook. It shows humans connected to all sorts of things, like jellyfish and worms, with a nice red line. What more for proof could you want than a nice red line, right? How about some fossil evidence? So let's look at a few of the famous hominids that misled not millions, billions of people. The messiah of Darwinism from about 1910 till the mid-1950s was Piltdown Man. It was discovered in Piltdown, England, and misled not millions, billions of people. Finally, in the mid-1950s, it was proven these jokers had taken the skull cap from a human, the jawbone from an orangutan, filed them down so they fit together, acid-treated both sides, buried them in a rock quarry in Piltdown, England, waited 2 years, and come along, and they dug up Piltdown Man and spent the rest of their lives as world-renowned evolutionists, speaking on any college campus they desired, and misled not millions, billions of people before the fraud was finally discovered. Nebraska Man was used as proof of Darwinism. All that they found in Nebraska Man was a piece of a broken tooth. They're pretty creative. From that broken tooth, they recreated Nebraska Man, his family, even the tools they would have worked with. It was later proven the tooth came from an extinct peccary, an extinct pig. There's a real Nebraska Man right there. Well, Lucy's been, along with Tiktaalik, Lucy's been the other messiah for Darwinism for 40 plus years. When they found it, they found about 35% of a skeleton. And they said, well, we know it's an ape becoming human because the femur, the thigh bone, angles to the knee, and humans have angled thigh bones. They forgot to mention that about all tree-dwelling apes have angled femurs. But they said, well, the knee joint is slightly bigger than a normal ape's knee, proving it's becoming a human. Well, you could take the knee joint of everybody in this room. They'd be different sizes. Doesn't prove anything. Oh, they also forgot to mention the knee in question was actually found over a mile away and 230 feet deeper in the straddle layer. Yeah, if that was Lucy's knee, I want to see the airplane that hit that monkey. Must get going right through the treetops about 800 miles an hour, I figure. Kapow! And this from 1987. Anatomists have concluded Lucy is not a link between ape and man and did not walk upright like a human. Yet here's a new textbook showing Lucy, a nice drawing of Lucy, walking upright like a human with normal human feet and talking on a cell phone. What are the odds? They found other such fossils now. They're called Australopithecus afarensis. They have curved fingers and toes so they can grab onto tree limbs. And this is one of the two messiahs. Now think about it logically. With millions of apes and monkeys having lived and died over the last 500 years alone, why does finding an ape bone prove Darwinian evolutionism? Doesn't it just prove that when monkeys and apes die, they leave their bones behind? And my friends, those are the top 10 big hitters of Darwinian evolution. And we just covered them all in about 47 minutes. No wonder the Bible tells us to avoid profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so-called. Not real science. Real science is your best friend. False science, that's a whole another ballgame, my friends. And Satan is the god of this world. The secular side has taken over public schools, universities, the media, the entertainment industry, etc. And they keep pushing their propaganda and lies on people, misleading the entire world, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. Don't err in your faith. Put your faith in the Word of God. That's the calling of our ministry. We teach about creation, evolution, age of the earth issues. We expose false anti-biblical teachings to provide a reason for the hope that's in the heart of all true believers and all true seekers. Tomorrow night, we're going to look at the top 10 pillars of death before Adam, i.e. old earth beliefs, including continental drift, radiometric dating, the ice ages, Grand Canyon, dinosaurs, and more. On Wednesday night, we're going to answer the top 25 skeptical questions that I get out there. And so I'll present the question and answers. Yes, sir.
I have a question on carbon dating.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, ask that in just a second, okay? But carbon dating is a great ally of Christianity. Real science. Thursday night, we'll look at America's Christian heritage and how the teaching of Darwinism has just about erased our freedoms. We're teetering on the edge today. And the changes in this country since 1963 that have really impacted just about everybody. And Friday night, we'll look at recreation during the tribulation. I'll take on some of the tribulation events and show how God may very well use them to restore the original creation. It'll still be at the time of Jesus' return fallen and cursed, but it's going to be spectacular, not like the junkyard we live in today. We have all of our teachings on our DVDs. You can check them out there. I don't copyright my DVDs. If you get our DVDs, you can make all the copies you want. A lot of people make it their own ministry to give out copies. Our Grand Canyon trips, I wish you guys would come out and do one with us. Awesome trips. How many of you been to Grand Canyon? Wow, that's a lot. What did you think when you first saw the original creation rock? Wasn't that awesome? Oh, nobody pointed that out to you, did they? I show you where the flood layers come in and lay right on top of the creation rock. And when you see it, you'll think, wow, why didn't I notice that? They're very different. And from the rim of the canyon down to the river is a mile. That's a big hole in the ground, right? What they won't tell you there used to be 1.5 miles of layers above today's rim that have been removed from southern Utah all the way to the sea. There's no way to explain it but flooding on a global scale, so they just don't tell you about it. But these are some of the things I share with people and show them while at the canyon. My book, The Cost, covers the top 10 old earth beliefs, top 10 Darwinian beliefs, top 10 proofs of creation, and more, referencing more than 200 Bible verses. And we have coloring books for kids with lots of information about Noah's Ark and dinosaur and our Christian heritage. Let me end with these two verses. Let's be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. Put your faith in the Word of God. There's a lot of deceit out there. We're warned about it throughout Scripture. Beware of it, my friends. And if I can help, let me know. God bless you guys.
Okay. Now, for those that had the questions, if you'll raise your hand, I'm going to come to you, but I'm going to hold a mic, and because that way we're going to speed things up a little bit and going to try to get our questions answered really quick. So the first one came from right back here. We'll go to you next. But Brother Michael, what was your question? Nice and loud. Hey.
It's only accurate to about 5,000 years, and then I guess this Lucy situation and some of these other findings.
That's a lot of questions, but the question that you have is just on carbon dating itself. How accurate is carbon dating?
Yeah, I'm actually going to explain carbon dating tomorrow night, but just briefly, the measurement of carbon-14 in organic remains. It decays away over time. The few scientists that actually deal with it pretty much admit it's only accurate for a couple thousand years. The less carbon-14 in an item, the older it dates, it should completely decay away in less than 80,000 years, so you can't carbon date something more than a few thousand years. But what they have found is they've never found a coal layer, a natural gas deposit, or an oil deposit that doesn't still have carbon-14 that would be gone in just a few thousand years, proving all those sedimentary layers on which the old Earth beliefs are based had to form in just a few thousand years. Only the global flood can really explain it. But I'll get into that more tomorrow night.
I don't think carbon should date at all here. We believe in courting.
What's a Hox gene?
Oh, a Hox gene? Homeobox gene. It's a control gene. So it's like a traffic cop. Picture a traffic cop, he tells traffic where to go. The Hox gene tells genetic information where to go. So let's say the genetic information to form the left front leg of a cow, a mutation in the Hox gene might cause it to send it to the wrong location. If you've ever seen a picture of a creature with, let's say, a leg sticking out of its back, that was probably a Hox gene mutation. Leads to monstrosities, not to beneficial changes, yeah.
I was just going to ask about fossil dating and circular reasoning, and then as far as the correlation between that and the flood, as far as the way that they found, I think they found fossils and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, that is what tomorrow night we'll be talking about: the age of the Earth, global flood, radiometric dating, but the key is the straddle layer formation. A lot of people, when I say straddle layer, may not know what I'm talking about. The crust of the Earth, you're seeing the side of a mountain, they got those straight lines. Those are strata layers, stratified layers, rock layers are all the same thing. But the crust of the Earth averages a mile deep with sedimentary layers laid down by water, pretty good evidence of the flood. The old Earth beliefs, including Darwinism, naturalism, and humanism, are all based on those layers having formed slowly over millions of years. If there was a global flood, it explains how they formed quickly. It's foretold in 2 Peter 3, in the last days, scoffers would deny the flood. So we're going to talk about all that and explain it tomorrow night, okay? It's a good question. It's a key question.
Mark, nice and loud.
Okay. I know you're going to cover it tomorrow night, but just a snippet. You're not going to disprove that there were ever dinosaurs on Earth, are you?
Will I prove there were dinosaurs?
Disprove.
Oh, no. The Bible says man and beast were both made on day 6. In my message, Noah's Ark and Dinosaurs, I show overwhelming evidence of dinosaurs from after the flood. You've heard of dragon stories and all the soft tissue remains, and we find cave drawings all over the world. They were called dragons up until about 170 some odd years ago. Ancient history books full of dragon stories. So we can talk about that more. I don't specifically get deep into dinosaurs tomorrow night. But yeah, I do cover those in our Noah's Ark and Dinosaur message. Yeah. Absolutely.
Have you met my sister, Mark? Who had their hand up here?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious, what would an argument be for someone who believes that the Rh negative bloodline is part of an ancient alien bloodline?
Well, I've never given that any thought, but the Bible tells us we're all made of one blood, and you can trace back to where one blood could have split off into the various blood types we have today. I don't think aliens are needed to support it, though.
Right. I just wonder, because Rh negative, they say, is missing the monkey gene, the rhesus monkey gene. So that's what I'm curious about.
I hadn't heard that, but I'd have to look into it. But humans can only produce humans, and kinds can only bring forth after their kinds. So I know of no alien interaction that would lead to humans, yeah.
Okay.
Don't look at me, I don't either.
Of course, now there is Pastor Tim, so I could stand
I know
corrected
if
on
one
that.
gene is missing, it produces monkey bread. It's excellent, if you've ever had it. Right here, and then I'm heading back to you. Yes.
I just have a question following hers, because in the Bible, when the fallen angels came down and bred with humans, could that be possibly something off of that? Because it says in the end days it will be the same.
Well, I mean, certainly that's possible, but now we're getting into some real speculation that, yeah. I get in enough trouble talking about the creation evolution issues, and that's a little too far for me to speculate upon.
Come this way.
Hey, Russ. Where do you think fossil fuels come from?
Where fossil what?
Fossil fuels.
Fossil fuels? Well, I was just discussing that with some folks the other day, and even today science seems to not have a real handle on some of it, but I think a lot of it comes from buried organic debris from the flood. Massive amounts of vegetation were buried. Certainly some is coming from the shale that was formed during the flood, and algae. They now believe algae forms a lot of petroleum products.
So it's almost like a renewable resource kind of thing?
What's that?
It's almost like a renewable resource kind of thing?
They are going back to some wells that were tapped dry 40 years ago and finding quite a bit of oil back in them. So now they're speculating that algae may produce a lot of petroleum products.
John.
What do you think about the flat Earth theory?
Well, I think that's, believe it or not, I get to ask that question a lot, and I be honest with you. There's probably a lot of people thinking about it. They've got some really neat videos, okay? But my dad was an avionics and electrical engineer who was instrumental in the initial development of our guidance systems for our initial intercontinental ballistic missiles that kept us safe through the Cold War. He had 29 U.S. patents, and many of his equations were based on the curvature of the Earth. So, yeah, I mean, the flat Earth, I put it with sort of with Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and Darwinian evolution.
I like to say this. Take a plane, okay, and just keep going straight. Start at this altitude and just keep it going exactly straight. You'll find out that the Earth will get a little further beneath you until all of a sudden you start burning up. You have to go like this. And the only people that really believe that fell off anyway.
I heard I watched a show once that talked about ice being formed around like the planet in like space, like another layer. Like they say there was heavens of the earth and heavens above. Is that true at all?
A canopy theory. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation. It's not there to test, study, and observe today, so we can only speculate on it. But actually, Friday night, I am going to talk about the possible restoration of a canopy around the Earth. So I'll speculate on that Friday night, but we can only speculate on it. It's not there to test and study today.
Hey Russ, what do you suggest that we do to? What can we do to stop the schools and everything from teaching this kind of garbage,
That's a really good question. To be honest with you, I used to go to college campuses quite a bit and talk, and I always got attacked by the professors. I'd be surrounded by 70, 80 kids afterwards. Man, I'll be back in church on Sunday. I always got attacked, though, by the professors and by the campus pastors. And what God showed me was until we start believing the Bible is true, going out on a secular campus, you'll make an impact, but you'll get undermined by people you think are on your side. So and God showed me at that time, and our ministry since is my wife and I consider our ministry evangelizing Christians. We need to learn the information. We need to share it with each other. We need to share it with other Christians. And once we get the church on board with the Bible being true, word for word and cover to cover. 90% of our seminaries teach old earth beliefs that put death before Adam. Their grads have filled the church. We need to get our side back on board. Then we can really make an impact out there. So that's why I say, that's the reason I don't copyright my DVDs, man. Get our DVDs, give them to everybody you know. Make 1 million copies, give them out. And let's make an impact. And then we can start sharing it with others. Good question.
What's your opinion on the LHC and them trying to create the God partner?
Any real scientific experiment is testable, studyable, and repeatable. Real science may discover how God did something. If they discover how God did something, that's great. So far, they haven't really come up with anything, but we're not afraid of real science. Real science, at the best, it'll just discover some of the truth of God, as it always has been. Fake science, that's another issue. The hype with it is probably off base, but if they ever discover something, you're gonna find it just fits with the Word of God.
You guys, there's a lot of hype out there about a lot of things. The hydrogen collider that is out there and everything, a lot of people are saying it's going to open up something for all of these things in the earth to be able to come up. If it's science, then let science do it. But other than that, do you understand how absurd some of the things that we actually believe in without good science behind it? So rather than make a fool of ourselves, then let's actually find some science. Just like a flat earth. A lot of people believe in flat earth. Okay, a lot of people in here believe in flat earth, but there's no real science behind it. Okay, if there was science behind it, people would be studying out that science behind it. Okay, well, let me see. Mike in the back, and then we're coming over to Les. Michael, nice and loud, can you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that all along, that Darwin recanted on his deathbed. His family said he did not. He did write. He had some doubts about his theory and why they weren't finding any fossil evidence, but he thought they eventually would. But here we are 160 years later, and they still haven't found anything, which is why they have all the frauds in the textbooks. So I guess when we get to heaven, just yell out, "Hey, Chuck," see if he shows up, and we'll find out. But that's the best I can tell you right now.
Mr. Lester.
No, that's a good question. They're going to say meteorites brought oceans slowly over millions of years. That's a lot of meteorites, you know. But yeah, they've got a lot of excuses. What they don't have is any observable evidence. It's just a fairy tale. Like I said earlier, if they'd start that out with Once Upon a Time and put it in a kid's book instead of not a school book, but a fairy tale book, I wouldn't have an issue with it. Yeah.
Okay, one more, Deb. How do we bring the love of God back into the schools?
Well, right now, I'll be honest with you, that's beyond my comprehension. I think until Jesus returns, unfortunately, we're still dealing with the secular world. Until Jesus returns as the Lion of Judah and reclaims his creation, we're going to be probably going in a downhill direction. But that doesn't mean we quit or give up. We're all given marching orders in the Bible. A lot of Christians say, I don't seem to have a calling. Everybody's got a calling.
That's right.
We're to pray continually, right? Everyone can do that, right? We're to spread the word. We can do that, right? And in Jude, we're told to contend for the faith. Learn some information. Contend for the faith. And it has to be a grassroots level effort, my friends. Hey, it's getting late, so I don't want to keep you guys too late because I want you to be here tomorrow night. We're going to talk about the age of the earth, radiometric dating, the global flood, Pangea, continental drift, the ice age, and I'll show you how all these things only fit a world that has endured a global flood. God bless you guys.